the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time. I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave. I'm a narcissist.
Disney Snow White 2025. The words alone might conjure images of magical kingdoms and enchanting songs, but for Disney executives, these words now trigger a very different reaction. Panic. What was meant to be a triumphant modern reimagining of a timeless classic has instead become a Hollywood horror story. After its dismal opening, the live-action Snow White has sent shockwaves through every level of the Mouse House, from CEO Bob Iger scrambling to control the damage to the actors and creatives caught in a storm of controversy. How did a beloved fairy tale turn into a critical and commercial catastrophe? Prepare to uncover the shocking truth behind the Snow White meltdown.
Snow White bombs, breaks records for the lowest live-action remake opening ever. Let me say that again. Ever.
The journey of Snow White from concept to screen was less a graceful waltz and more a chaotic stumble through production quicksand. Behind the glossy veneer of a Disney blockbuster lay a reality of escalating crises. Imagine a film set besieged by constant rewrites, not as refinements, but as desperate attempts to salvage a narrative that seemed to crumble at every turn. Multiple rounds of costly reshoots became a glaring symptom of a deeper malaise, a lack of a cohesive vision from the outset. This wasn't simply about tweaking scenes, it was a radical, ongoing reconstruction of the film's very DNA. Sources whisper of conflicting creative mandates, a rushed timeline imposed from above, and a script that struggled to find its footing from the first draft. The pressure to modernize a classic, while simultaneously appeasing nostalgic fans and navigating evolving social sensitivities, created a perfect storm of creative gridlock. The result wasn't a polished gem, but a cinematic Frankenstein's monster, stitched together from mismatched ideas and hurried compromises. Dialogue felt disjointed, scenes clashed tonally, and character arcs, once potentially promising, were reportedly left fragmented and unresolved. Even internal screenings, meant to gauge audience reaction early on, allegedly sounded alarm bells, highlighting fundamental issues with pacing and characterization. Yet, propelled by the unwavering belief in the invincibility of the Disney brand, the production machine lumbered onward, seemingly deaf to the growing chorus of concerns.
Zegler also faced blowback after posting Free Palestine. Godot is from Israel and served in the Israeli army.
The internet erupted not just in critical reviews, but in a firestorm of controversy, largely ignited by accusations of wokeness and ideological agendas hijacking a beloved fairy tale. This wasn't just about artistic interpretation, it was about a perceived betrayal of the source material, a feeling that core elements of Snow White had been sacrificed at the altar of modern sensibilities. The furor intensified as details emerged about deleted scenes, rumored to be key moments showcasing a more overtly progressive Snow White. Imagine scenes where Snow White actively rejects traditional romantic tropes, not through subtle empowerment, but through confrontational monologues that felt jarringly anachronistic within the fairy tale setting. Consider the reported scene where she dismisses the prince's rescue attempt with scorn, or her insistence on handshakes over kisses from the dwarfs, framed as a rigid enforcement of personal boundaries. These weren't minor cuts, they were perceived as deliberate attempts to sanitize and reshape Snow White in a way that alienated a significant portion of the audience. Rachel Zegler, caught in the crossfire, reportedly felt deeply frustrated, believing that her nuanced portrayal had been butchered, leaving her to embody a watered-down version that satisfied neither her artistic vision nor the demands of a nostalgic fan base. The deleted scenes became symbolic of a larger cultural battle, a struggle over ownership of classic stories and the delicate balance between modernization and respectful adaptation. This wasn't just about a few removed moments, it was about the perceived soul of Snow White being lost in translation.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
The financial reckoning arrived with brutal clarity at the box office. The premiere of Snow White wasn't met with the usual fanfare and eager crowds, but with an unsettling quiet. Empty theaters became the defining image of the film's opening weekend, a stark and embarrassing visual representation of its commercial failure. The box office numbers weren't just low, they were abysmal, plummeting far below even the most pessimistic industry forecasts. Analysts didn't sugarcoat the reality, declaring it a resounding financial disaster, a catastrophic miscalculation of audience interest. This wasn't just a movie failing to meet expectations, it was a Disney flagship title sinking without a trace, leaving a gaping hole in projected revenues. The financial repercussions extended far beyond immediate ticket sales. Merchandise tie-ins, usually a reliable revenue stream for Disney blockbusters, utterly tanked. Toys, costumes, and tie-in apparel languished on shelves unsold and unwanted. Retail partners who had invested heavily in Snow White merchandise based on the presumed success of a Disney fairy tale were left holding the bag, facing mountains of unsold inventory and shattered profit projections. The once golden Snow White brand, a symbol of guaranteed family entertainment and commercial triumph, suddenly carried the stench of failure, a toxic association that threatened to contaminate other Disney ventures. How could a Disney movie, particularly one carrying the iconic weight of Snow White, be met with such deafening silence, such profound disinterest from audiences? The echoing emptiness of the cinemas spoke volumes about a deep and fundamental disconnect between Disney's vision and what audiences were willing to embrace.
And it's just the most emotional experience to see little girls dress up as Snow White, and I hope that they will for years to come.
Within the polished walls of Disney headquarters, the box office bomb detonated, sending shockwaves of panic and recrimination throughout the corporate structure. The initial shock quickly morphed into internal turmoil as the blame game commenced with a vengeance. Bob Iger, brought back to restore stability and creative direction, found himself facing not just a single failed film, but a full-blown corporate crisis that exposed deeper fissures within the company. Questions swirled around the creative leadership, the decision-making processes, and the very direction Disney was charting for its treasured legacy properties. Was the pursuit of modern relevance overshadowing the fundamental storytelling principles that had made Disney an entertainment titan? Whispers of internal dissent grew louder. Longtime animators, writers, and storytellers, the custodians of Disney's creative heritage, reportedly felt increasingly marginalized, their experience and craftsmanship sidelined in favor of corporate mandates driven by marketing metrics and sensitivity checklists. Different factions emerged, each with their own interpretation of what went wrong and who was responsible. Some pointed to the creative direction spearheaded by figures like Greta Gerwig, questioning whether her artistic sensibilities aligned with the demands of a classic Disney fairy tale. Others blamed corporate oversight, suggesting that a top-down, risk-averse approach had stifled genuine creativity and led to a homogenized, uninspired product. The internal fallout from Snow White wasn't just about a failed project, it was about a deep-seated identity crisis within Disney, a struggle for the soul of the studio itself, and a looming leadership challenge for Bob Iger as he navigated a kingdom increasingly divided.
Made Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace. Then she discusses the deep, deep sickness in this country. There is no help, no counsel in any of them. And she also attacked Twitter and Elon and finished it all with Donald Trump.
The Snow White saga resonated far beyond the confines of Disney, sending tremors throughout the entire Hollywood landscape. It served as a stark and undeniable warning sign, flashing red across studio boardrooms and executive suites. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a potential symptom of a broader industry malaise, a growing trend of reboot and remake fatigue, and a creeping suspicion that Hollywood might be losing touch with the evolving tastes and expectations of its audience. The failure of Snow White joined a growing list of high-profile reboots and reimagining that had stumbled at the box office, raising fundamental questions about the industry's over-reliance on familiar intellectual property. Are studios pushing nostalgic properties too far, too fast, in directions that alienate the very fans who cherish the originals? Is there a point of diminishing returns for rehashed ideas? A saturation point beyond which audiences crave originality over recycled narratives? Snow White's disastrous performance became a multi-billion-dollar case study in potential reboot overreach, a cautionary tale written in red ink and trending hashtags. It sparked industry-wide soul-searching, forcing studios to confront uncomfortable truths about their creative strategies and their connection with audiences. Is Hollywood trapped in a remake bubble, blinded by the perceived safety of familiar IP while neglecting the vital need for fresh stories and authentic creative risks? The industry watched with bated breath, wondering if Snow White was merely the first domino to fall, signaling a deeper shift in audience preferences and a growing impatience with creatively bankrupt rehashes of beloved classics.
Have you ever been to that Snow White ride at Disneyland?
I get stopped for photos every time I'm online for the Snow White ride, and it is I have to pretend like, oh God, well, crazy that we're in.
The box office failure of Snow White was undeniably devastating, but it was compounded by an equally damning critical drubbing. Review after review echoed similar sentiments: disjointed narrative, uninspired direction, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material's charm. Critics didn't just pan the film, they dissected it, highlighting its flaws with a level of yi-zhi-xing consistency rarely seen for a Disney production. The critical consensus painted a picture of a film that was not only commercially unviable but also artistically bankrupt, a far cry from the quality and craftsmanship typically associated with the Disney brand. This critical rejection further solidified the negative audience perception, creating a feedback loop of negativity that amplified the film's downfall. It wasn't just that audiences didn't show up; those who did and those who relied on critical assessments to guide their viewing choices were overwhelmingly disappointed. The critical failure underscored a deeper disconnect between Disney's creative choices and the expectations of both critics and general audiences. It demonstrated that even the most recognizable brand name and the most beloved fairy tale could not withstand the weight of negative reviews and a perceived lack of artistic merit. Snow White wasn't just a financial loss. It was a critical debacle that exposed a fundamental breakdown in creative vision and audience connection, proving that in Hollywood, box office numbers are only one measure of success, or in this case, spectacular failure.
3, 2, 1.
Snow White!
Beyond the corporate fallout and industry-wide repercussions, the human cost of the Snow White disaster is also significant, particularly for its lead actress, Rachel Zegler. Once poised for a major career breakthrough, Snow White has instead placed her at a difficult crossroads. Imagine the pressure and scrutiny of being the face of such a high-profile failure, a film that has become synonymous with creative missteps and audience rejection. Zegler, who had previously garnered acclaim for her talent and potential, now finds her career narrative intertwined with this cinematic misfire. The initial hopes that Snow White would catapult her to superstardom have been replaced by questions about how this experience will shape her future trajectory. Will she be able to effectively distance herself from the film's negative reception? Will future casting directors view her involvement as a liability or an unfortunate circumstance? Insiders whisper about the potential damage to her reputation within the industry, the challenges of overcoming the negative association with such a prominent flop. However, Zegler's talent remains undeniable, and Hollywood is known for second chances. The question becomes, how will she navigate this challenging moment, and what strategic career choices will she make to rebuild and redefine her image in the wake of Snow White's shadow? Her future career path now hinges on resilience, strategic project selection, and the ability to demonstrate that her talent transcends this single, albeit significant, setback.
I love you, Rachel. I love you too. Thank you. Just like, did you get all me crying?
Greta Gerwig, a director celebrated for her critically acclaimed and commercially successful films like Lady Bird and Little Women, entered the Snow White project with a reputation for nuanced storytelling and a distinct artistic voice. However, the Snow White debacle has inevitably cast a shadow on her directorial brand, raising questions about her versatility and her ability to navigate the complexities of a massive studio production. While not the sole writer or director in the traditional sense, her creative influence on Snow White was widely acknowledged, and her name has become inextricably linked to its failure. The critical drubbing and audience rejection of Snow White contrasts sharply with the overwhelming success of her previous film, Barbie. This juxtaposition prompts reflection on whether Gerwig's directorial style, while brilliantly suited to certain projects, might not translate seamlessly to all genres or scales of filmmaking. Has Snow White exposed limitations in her approach when applied to a legacy property within the corporate machinery of Disney? Will studios now be more hesitant to entrust her with large-scale, high-stakes projects? While her talent remains evident, the Snow White experience serves as a significant test of her resilience and adaptability as a director. The industry will be watching closely to see how she responds to this setback, whether she pivots to smaller, independent projects to reaffirm her artistic strengths, or seeks to prove her mettle within the studio system by taking on new, challenging assignments. Snow White has undeniably added a layer of complexity to the narrative surrounding Greta Gerwig's career, moving beyond the unblemished glow of Barbie and into a more nuanced and perhaps more challenging phase.
Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that saying, Rachel Zegler can F right off.
The Snow White crisis arrives at a particularly sensitive time for Disney, coinciding with the looming departure of CEO Bob Iger in 2026. Iger, who returned to steer the company through turbulent waters, now faces the daunting task of navigating the fallout from this major misstep and charting a course for Disney's future in an increasingly unpredictable entertainment landscape. Snow White has become a symbol of the challenges Disney faces, balancing legacy with modernity, creative innovation with brand preservation, and appealing to a diverse global audience while maintaining its core identity. The film's failure has amplified existing anxieties about Disney's creative direction and its ability to consistently deliver both critical and commercial hits. Investor confidence, already wavering in the face of streaming fragmentation and evolving consumer habits, has been further tested by the Snow White debacle. The pressure on Iger to demonstrate decisive leadership and implement effective strategies to revitalize Disney's film division is immense. Will he oversee a significant restructuring of Disney's creative processes? Will there be personnel changes at the executive level? Will Disney shift its strategic focus, perhaps prioritizing original content over reboots or adopting a more cautious approach to reimagining legacy properties? The response to the Snow White crisis will likely define Iger's remaining tenure and set the stage for his successor. The future direction of Disney, a global entertainment giant, hangs in the balance, dependent on the lessons learned from this fairy tale fiasco and the leadership decisions made in its aftermath. The kingdom is shifting, and Bob Iger's final act as CEO will be crucial in determining whether Disney can successfully navigate these turbulent times and reclaim its position as an undisputed leader in entertainment. Snow White 2025 transcends the label of mere movie flop. It has become a cultural touchstone, a cautionary legend etched into the annals of Hollywood history. It stands as a brutal and undeniable lesson in brand mismanagement, creative overreach, and the perilous consequences of misjudging and alienating your audience. The film's failure isn't just about lost revenue, it's about damaged brand equity, shaken investor confidence, and a profound questioning of Disney's creative direction. Can Disney truly recover from this self-inflicted fairy tale fiasco? Will they learn the hard lessons embedded in this meltdown and recalibrate their approach to adapting and reimagining beloved stories? And more broadly, will Hollywood as a whole heed this stark warning, or is Snow White just a prelude to a new era of costly reboot disasters, a cycle of creative stagnation fueled by nostalgia and risk aversion? The answers to these questions remain uncertain, but one thing is resoundingly clear. The saga of Snow White 2025 is far from over. Its legacy will linger, haunting Hollywood boardrooms and shaping industry conversations for years to come. It serves as a potent reminder that no amount of marketing spin, star power, or corporate might can ultimately conceal a production that has fundamentally lost its way, and more importantly, lost its heart. The future of fairy tales in Hollywood, and indeed the future of Hollywood storytelling itself, may well depend on the lessons learned from the ashes of this cinematic meltdown.